Welcome into the block. I am Colin Kennedy, and I've got my guys right over here. We're in studio. We made it.
Yeah.
I would give y'all a fist bump, but I'm kind of all the way across the table. But gentlemen, you made it to Nashville, joining the party with me. How we feeling, gentlemen?
It's good to be here. It's good to get down to the studio, man, and get some live work in right here at the main office.
Yeah.
It's fun to be where the goat works every day. See how it goes and see what you do every day.
Well, I don't know about that. The people who make it happen behind the scenes are over on the other side of the wall. But the two rock stars are in the building. Everyone's shaking their hand, dapping them up. We're all excited that the block is going to be live right here in Nashville, Tennessee today. What do I want to start with? Myles Brennan. But before we do, you at home, like, share, subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Help us build the block from the ground up ahead of the 2022 season. All right, let's talk about Myles Brennan because that was a little bit of breaking news yesterday. The LSU quarterback is going to step away from football, and he released the statement that revealed all of this, saying, quote, "I am forever grateful for every opportunity I've been given, every obstacle I've overcome, and every second I've been a Tiger. However, after 5 seasons, it is time for me to start a new chapter in life," end quote. So he's going to go pro in something other than sports. I think he's got a major in sports administration, so we'll see. Maybe he creates his own team and starts there. But bottom line is he won't be starting at LSU. It is now down to Jaden Daniels and the Nuss Bus, Garrett Nussmeier. You guys know where I stand on it, but Carl, going to you first. One more domino falls. How do we view this quarterback room now?
Well, it showed that it's a two-man race now
Yeah.
between Nussmeier and Jaden Daniels. And I think what's really important, something that I'm paying close attention to, I think Jaden Daniels gave up his spot at Arizona State as a starting quarterback that was on the radar for NFL teams. And now he's in a competition with the guy. And I think he might have the early nod, but he's going to have to play lights out all season, Blake and Colin, in order to hold on to that spot. And so we'll wonder when he looks back and says, I left Arizona State where I was the unquestioned guy, and now I'm in a battle at LSU, and I got to be prepared every single day. We'll see if that boded well for his NFL future.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how this goes because they'll have another scrimmage on Saturday, and then I would assume on Monday that Brian Kelly would name a starting quarterback. So I think Nussmeier, in my opinion, I think is eventually going to be the guy there. I think they're gonna go with youth and more of a pro style passing game, but it's competition everywhere you go, and I think it'll be curious to see who they go with, but I think you'll see both quarterbacks playing at some point this season.
I think we'll see both early, and Jaden Daniels does bring the running athletic element to it, but in Brian Kelly's career, he has always had a drop back guy who can make all of the throws, and I think that favors Nussmeier.
So I want to piggyback off of that real quick because obviously we talk about Brian Kelly, but his offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, coming over from Cincinnati, he had Desmond Ridder, who is a mobile guy. And at Go 24/7, apparently there's a feeling, if you will, around the program that Jaden Daniels, because of the legs that he provides, might be a better fit for Denbrock, and to this point is perceived as a little bit more of the favorite. Do we buy that, though? Should that be the perception at LSU, Carl? Especially as you as a coach, would you buy into that if you're an offensive coordinator?
I don't buy into it because it's two different situations. Luke Fickell is a defensive-minded guy who's going to let his offensive coordinator run it the way that he wants to run it. Brian Kelly is hands-on with his offense. He's always done it a certain way. He will not be overruled in his football program. Big difference being between an offensive-minded head coach and a defensive-minded guy.
I think a lot of times there are leaks, and they want you to think a certain way that's not actually the way it's going to happen. Cincinnati and LSU are different, obviously different teams and different season. These quarterbacks are different players. Ridder was a very special talent that was an exceptional player and had a lot of experience. He started there for 4 years. So it'll be curious to see what they do, but until they scrimmage on Saturday, I think that it's still going to be a competition. And like I said earlier, I think it'll go into the season. I think they'll both play early, and someone eventually will take over and be the guy there.
Also, you got to remember that LSU brought Brian Kelly in to compete and win for national championships. He's not there for any other reason. So it's still going to come down to who Brian Kelly believes gives LSU the best chance to win. He moved down to Louisiana, and he even acquired an accent on the way. So I think that he's ready to try to win a championship for the great people of New Orleans.
Well, but you got to remember, they're not winning a national championship this year.
No,
I mean, it
they're
ain't
not.
happening.
You're right about
So,
that.
like, you got to, like, to me, you got to look to the future. And Garrett Nussmeier gives you the ability to look towards the future, get guys experience, get young guys on the field. They've got some veteran guys that are good players, especially on their defense. And Keyshawn Boutte is obviously one of the top receivers, but it's not going to happen for them this year. So you got to think long term, if you're, in my opinion.
With the transfer portal, Blake, can we even look at things long term? Though, can we even look for the future? Because we know that if guys don't play, they're going to get out of there. So that might also favor a guy like Nussmeier, because you know if you don't play him, you know what might happen.
Well, and I think if you look at LSU this year, they turned over about 40% of their roster after the season ended. So you would expect them to have more turnover after this season. So if they can get the right guys with the LSU brand and with the great players that they have in Louisiana that have left the state, if they get some of those guys to come back, I think that they can really make a dent and really improve their team significantly in 2 football seasons.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that real quick, Carl, because Blake, I know where you stand on this. Are you buying that LSU is not necessarily a factor this year? Because, I mean, we know what they got at receiver, defensive line. If this quarterback pans out, I mean, can they not make some noise this season?
Well, not if they're in the same division with Alabama.
That's true.
You know, not this year. I do agree with Blake on that. I don't believe that LSU can compete for a national championship this year, but that is what Brian Kelly was hired for, and they better get to that level quick, fast, and in a hurry.
I'm at least curious, though, Blake. Like, they may not necessarily be competing for a title, but I feel like this team, to say the least, is somewhat of a wild card considering the talent they have on the roster.
Yeah, they've got some talent, and they have a great schedule. Their schedule this year sets up for them to win some games. We talked about this earlier, but I bet Brian Kelly wishes they could have the same schedule next year because it really sets up nicely for them. But they're going to win some games. They've got a tough schedule, but you know they've got talent too. So they're going to pull off some upsets, and you never know. I mean, LSU's got some talent, so
yeah.
if they can click on all cylinders, and they'll be good to go.
We know what the gauntlet of the SEC West is, but I still feel like if they get that quarterback position figured out, man, there's a lot of good players on that roster.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what they can accomplish because I also think that staff is pretty solid too. Now, I do want to talk about transfers real quick, guys, because we talked about Jaden Daniels, some of the other transfers that they got. There's a lot of guys leaving now because maybe some of these new faces are coming in and making some noise on that depth chart. We've had some mid-camp transfers. You got guys like Jarrett Dagey. You got Ken Talley, Timmy McClain, Iyabi Anoma, a former 5-star recruit. A lot of movement all of a sudden as we get closer to the season. Feels like that's a little rare and feels like that shouldn't be happening either, Blake. Weird development here in college football.
Yeah, I mean, in today's college football age, it's just kids don't get they want their opportunity to play.
Yeah.
And if they know early on it's not going to happen, then they want to transfer, which is understandable. They want a chance to compete, get on the field. So, I mean, my understanding is on May 1st you were ineligible to play the incoming season if you transferred after May 1st. But from what I'm hearing is August 1st starts this new cycle, so you can transfer and be eligible to play during camp. So. I'll be interested what the NCAA rules on this, and if they allow waivers, which it sounds like they will. They obviously don't want any lawsuits or any that's the big thing with the transfer portal. So, but to me, most of these guys are veterans and they've been around the block and they know it's not going to happen for them. It's when you see young guys transfer when they've just got to campus, that's what kind of bugs me because you got to have some resolve and give it a chance, give it a year, you know. So that's my thought.
I mean,
on it.
guys, you're 2 weeks in the camp, and you're leaving. The football season is long. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have changes, and these guys have to understand still that football is a developmental game. You have to be coached. You have to learn how to play your role within the system. And so to give that up a week or two in the camp, you're going to jump into another team's camp that's already been in. How are you going to play there? and something that a lot of recruits and young men need to hear. You go to one school and you don't crack the lineup. You go to another school, Blake, and you can't crack the lineup there. Are you good enough to play at that level? At what point do you need to buckle down on your education and what you're going to have to do outside of football? A lot of jumping around from guys trying to find the easiest way to play, but sometimes allowing yourself to be coached and accepting the fact that you're not as good as you think you are and that you really need to improve your game in some facets, that also needs to be taken into consideration.
And I think, too, if you transfer somewhere now and let's just say you don't get a waiver and you're not playing, you're hurting yourself and your development because you're not playing football. And you're not in a structured place that's, with the nutrition and the coaching and just learning and developing to being a better football player. So you would hope that these players would end up somewhere and at least be able to practice wherever they land. But if you're not practicing and you're not developing, then you're getting worse, because that's what football players do. I mean, you have a short 5-year window to do it.
Yeah, I think of all of these developments, someone like Ken Talley, the defensive end out of Penn State transfer, that's a freshman leaving all of a sudden.
Unbelievable.
And to your point, Blake, that's a guy who's not going to be able to develop in his initial season of college football. And we see how that sometimes pans out for the negative, literally on paper, because I want to go to a Yabi Anoma, former 5-star, like a top 5 player for us in the top 247 at one point. This guy's still moving around trying to live up to that potential, Blake. I mean, he was at Alabama once upon a time, and now here we are with this guy.
Yeah, you have to remember, when you leave Alabama and you leave not on good terms, to my knowledge, there's maybe been one player, Alvin Kamara, that's actually made it.
Yeah.
There's usually a lot of red flags, and they do a great job of trying to fix anything that needs fixing, and they'll do whatever it takes to get you right. And so it's a cautionary tale. Schools have to be very careful about taking some of these guys if they're leaving on bad terms. If you leave on good terms and you just can't play there, then that's a different story. But to me, there's a lot of red flags with some of these guys, and these coaches have to make sure that they do their homework on why they're leaving, because if it's not for the right reasons, then it could be a problem elsewhere.
My mom used to tell me growing up, wherever you go, there you are. So at some point, some of these guys have to realize that they are, in fact, the problem. You're talking about a kid who came in that was an excellent edge rusher coming out of high school, and everybody in the country is needing an edge rusher, and you have not yet found your way to get the job done. Commit to the program, commit to excellence, and so many of these guys' problems is within themselves. And if you hunker down and do what you're supposed to do, you might find some success. Running around is not always the best thing to do.
Cautionary tale, as you've kind of coined the phrase here on the show, Carl. It's constantly panning out in front of our eyes. At some point, hopefully these guys learn, even though the whole deadline concept is certainly somewhat of a lie. Now, obviously, these guys, wherever they land, eventually have to actually start developing. And how do you do that? With scrimmages. Scrimmages, though, in the world of college football, ladies and gentlemen, kind of taking some heat. Not the best time to be an organized event ahead of the 2022 season. We've seen a lot of injuries, most notably guys like Isaiah Nayer, and now losing a guy in Evan Pryor, who I was listening to our guys at Bucknuts the other day in a Twitter space. They thought Evan Pryor was potentially going to be running back 2 for the Buckeyes this season. Explosive player, and how did he get to that point, Blake? He was getting reps in scrimmages and in practices, and now he's out, but at the same time, these scrimmages are still very valuable for guys.
Yeah, the scrimmages are everything in college football, and you have to do this. It's part of the process. Unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of injuries. I mean, it's just like the NFL. It's like the preseason NFL. You see all these guys that are out for the year that haven't, hardly played. But in college football, you are not going to get on the field until you prove to your coach that you are a guy that can go against your ones on your team and compete at the highest level. They're not going to put you in the game. And so, unfortunately, injuries occur, but it's game speed reps. It's all about situations. Football is just a game of different situations. And if you don't practice this at full speed against the best players on your team, then you're never going to know. And you throw a guy in there that hadn't played, then and they're not ready, then you lose the game. Yeah. And so it's a tough deal, but it's just part of the process. And unfortunately, guys are going to get hurt every year doing it.
Blake, and I think that a lot of people forget that football players are in school on football teams to do what? To play football. And part of playing football is scrimmaging. When do you want to find out that the kid can't get the job done? When he gets your quarterback killed in a conference game, when you lose a game, when everything is on the line. These guys have to scrimmage. They have to play football. You have to build your body up and develop a callus out there to play that game. It's a tough physical game. Sometimes guys get hurt, but you do have to scrimmage. How do you even know that a guy can help your football team if he doesn't go out there in the scrimmages and perform? You got to get these guys out there playing. I know fans get upset every time somebody goes down, but that head football coach has a job to do, and those guys have got to get out there and play football.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron, and when you're going ones on ones or twos versus twos, then it lets you know, gives you feedback on what this person's capable. And when you're going full speed and you are, in game-like situations, there's a different adrenaline. Your body goes through different things than you just do in a casual practice. I mean, practice is hard, but when you're scrimmaging and it's a game-like situation, it's just a different deal. And that's why you see these guys in the first couple of weeks of the season cramp so much. Yeah. Because they're expelling everything that they have. So you got to know what you're doing. You can't bubble wrap these guys. You can't, hold out one of your star players and just say show up week one and go do it, because they're going to get hurt doing that.
Yeah.
And also remember that NFL scouts are coming to a lot of these scrimmages too. There's teams that have 15 to 20 NFL scouts coming to practice, coming to scrimmages, and imagine being a guy that wants to play in the National Football League, and you got every NFL team on the sideline watching the scrimmage, and you're not playing because you're trying to protect yourself from injury. You're saying a lot to those guys too when it's time for them to open up their checkbooks and decide who they're going to draft and where they're going to draft them at.
All right, so let me ask you guys this. You both coached, and obviously you're probably running a lot of these things. How did you keep guys engaged, willing to go out there, and especially when it kind of gets to cautionary season, when they see guys going down? What were you doing in some of these meetings or at practice to keep guys engaged and willing to go out there and scrimmage, Carl?
It's always been my experience that guys that are football players wanted to play football. If I would have held Ronnie Perkins out when he was playing for me in high school, he would have been very upset with that because he wants to play football. And those guys are thinking about that. They're not thinking about getting hurt. And sometimes injuries do happen, but for the most part, all of those guys want to be out there playing with their teammates. And you can really hurt the psychology and the psyche of your team if you're holding top guys out and making everybody else do the work.
Yeah, it creates an opportunity for the next guy to make a statement. So if you're not playing, someone else is going to come in and Wally Pip you. I mean, that's just the way it is in college football. It happens all the time. So you want to. So if that's your chance to go in there and play, then you want to take advantage of it and show the coaches that, yeah, I'm ready for this. You might not think I'm ready, but I am ready. So every player that's playing football wants to go play. That they're there to play. And the only situation that I personally would tell a guy not to go in is if the game was over. I mean, if it was, 28-7 with 2 minutes to go in the game, then I'm not going to put my star player in the game because it's over. So that would be the only situation for me where I would hold somebody out.
I hate to say it, but sometimes injuries create incentives. And at the end of the day, when a vacancy creates, you got to fill it at some point. So hopefully, as we roll through fall camp, these guys will sub in for some of these star players who have been injured. And eventually, as college football goes, you'll have guys who step up and produce for some of these top-tier teams. I think that's going to do it for today's show. How awesome was this to get the crew together? I mean, it feels great. Hopefully, we can do this a whole lot more moving forward. But, guys, it was a whole lot of fun. Thank you at home for watching. Before you leave, like, share, subscribe here on the YouTube channel. We're building the block from the ground up. And, again, right around the corner from college football. Check these two out on Twitter and at 247sports.com for all things college football. Gentlemen, it's always fun.